In 1 week, I visited every single state park in Wyoming. All 11 of them. This is Goshen Man, the Wyoming State Parks.
That's right, in under a week, I visited all the state parks in Wyoming, cause last summer I visited all the state parks in Montana, so figured Wyoming was next. First, I should mention that even though there are other units in the Wyoming State Park system, I only visited ones with the title of state park, so no recreation areas. Now, there's not a lot to cover, but what Wyoming lacks in quantity, it makes up for with quality. Or at least I think so. I'm going to start off in the northeast corner and go kind of clockwise. Now, if you don't care about my breakdown of state parks and just want to see the ranking, skip to this time. Let's get started with Keyhole State Park. This is close to Devil's Tower, but it's not like close enough to see it or anything. I just want to mention it. At first, it's kind of underwhelming. You drive up to it and you're like, oh, it's just kind of like a lake and there's like a speck a little forest around, but then pulled into where my campsite was, and there was like this cool cliff area with these pines alongside the lake, and I could even see some fish jumping out in the water over here. Now, I did end up camping here. That is one of the things you can do. They have camping, boating, and a couple of day use areas. Now, this was some of the worst sleep I had had in my life. There was a storm that night. Now, my tent was pretty good at protecting me from the elements. You know, I wasn't really feeling the wind. I didn't get wet. However, it was very insulated, so I was basically dying in a sauna while like 30-mile winds are knocking my tent around. I don't think I got like 3 hours of sleep even, so yeah, that wasn't great. I stayed at Coulter Bay, but there's several campgrounds and day use areas scattered around the reservoir, so when I woke up in the morning, I decided to check some of them out. Now, Keyhole State Park is named after the Keyhole Reservoir that it focuses around. Now, was it named that because it looks like a keyhole? No. It's actually because of a cattle brand that was based nearby. And when I was driving around the state park, I saw a hawk holding a snake. Now, it dropped it before I was able to record it. There's actually a lot of birds here. You know, if you enjoy birds, might be a place to go. And I saw on Google Maps that there was a POI called Arch Rock, so I took the route to drive past it, and I saw that there was nothing here, so that's a bit of a bust. But then a little bit down the way, there's like this weird structure in a playground, I guess? Maybe that's the Arch Rock? That doesn't seem likely. Check out some more access points. Now, this, of course, has a lot of boat launches. You know, that's the main activity here is boating and fishing, but there are a couple day use areas that you can get a nice view at, have a little picnic and whatnot. Cool little forest drive here. That's kind of the vibe. Now, there are a lot of different access points. I didn't visit all of them because, like, you know, a lot of them have the same vibe. But there is one public beach area where it's just like, hey, if you want to hang out, chill at the beach, it exists. It's alright. Now, the state parks of Wyoming are spread all throughout the state, which is nice, you know, you get to see some diverse landscapes, but it also means that the biggest challenge of this trip wasn't the sheer number of them, it was just getting between them. I think for all but a couple, it's multiple hours between them. Case in point, I'm going pretty much to the center of the state now, near Casper, Wyoming for Ednis K. Wilkins State Park. Now, this is the only one I had actually visited before, and I don't remember it being all that interesting, and I was kind of right. Now, there are all sorts of things here, like this wagon. They've got a beach, little pond, basketball. They've got some nice day-use amenities. And they got another one of these rock things, and I see that's a bison. I think most of the state parks have one of these, which is kind of like a neat little thing to tie them together. This state park doesn't have any camping, at least I don't believe so. It might have overnight, though, in these things. I'm not 100% sure what they are, though. I think they're like some kind of cabin that you can sleep in. This park's main strong suit, I would say, is a lot of trails. They all have kind of a pretty similar vibe, you know, hiking through like this riverside forest here. Yeah, it's kind of a neat vibe. You can hike along the river, see some plants. There's a cactus. There's some paved trails, some unpaved trails. I don't know, scenery's not too interesting. Also at this state park was train spotting number 1. This state park was named after Ednis K. Wilkins, the first woman in the Wyoming House of Representatives. Most of the state parks have a little booth you're supposed to pay at, and in case there's not a ranger there to pay, they have like a little self-pay station. This was the only state park where anyone was ever at that booth. The next one, just down the interstate a little bit, Glendo State Park. Now, I thought this one was just gonna end up being another reservoir, but the first thing I ended up seeing was this cool viewpoint looking down in the canyon here. You can see like the river snaking around in the dam. And I saw this road going down over here. I'm like, oh shit. I can go down that, so of course I'm going to. This state park is named for the nearby town of Glendo, which gets its name from the Gaelic word for green. And this area definitely demonstrates it. Now, unfortunately, I didn't go too far on this one because, you know, storm. Common theme here for this week. Then when the storm passed, you know, I came back up and saw this view, and I was thinking, How is the coolest state park I've been to Glendo? Like, that's just like a random town I've passed by on the interstate and never thought more of. Actually pretty cool, like cool views, big old lake, you know, it's got all your typical reservoir stuff, boating, camping, fishing, etc. And it's also like a pretty large reservoir. It's the 6th largest in Wyoming. 3 steps up from Keyhole, which was the 9th largest. And like this view right here, I was like, all right, I'm hooked. Wyoming state parks are all pretty cool so far. Now this one is, you know, as I said earlier, it's pretty long, so it's a decently long drive to get to the beach, but there's some cool views along the way. And this one has like an actual beach. I mean, you know, I'm sure someone from the coast is gonna be like, you know, you call that a beach? For like a landlocked state, it's a pretty good beach, honestly. To have like an actual established, like, hey, this is a beach for like swimming and maybe like a canoe or something. Just like a nice large area to spread out and hang around. There's some nice tree shade over here. Doing this in July was probably, definitely, a mistake. It is so hot and dry out, and there is not a lot of shade in Wyoming. There's storms all the time. Getting to soak in the water at these lakes feels really nice. Heading on over to the next state park, Guernsey. Now this is the shortest distance between 2 state parks in Wyoming. I think it was about 15 to 30 minutes. Now it does have a museum, but unfortunately it was closed by the time I got there. Now I've been to a lot of like these kind of visitor center museum things out in Wyoming and in the West, so I'm not too stressed out. I'm sure I had a lot of similar information to what I've heard before, but not worry about that because Guernsey honestly has like probably the coolest view so far. What's going on, man? I thought these were just gonna be like, oh, it's a reservoir out in the scrubland, you can see some mountains in the distance, blah, blah, blah. But no, this one's cool. You're like snaking through canyons and stuff. And there's all these cool viewpoints where you're perched upon it. Cool 360 view of the whole area. Oh my goodness, I've driven past these areas so many times, I had no idea this was here. Now, I should plan these out more, but I don't want to spoil too much of what I'm going to see at these parks. But at the same time, there was more of Guernsey that I should have seen. But also, storm again. See what I'm going to see real quick before the storm gets here. The thing I decided I had to see was a point of interest called the Castle. So I drove on over to it, thought it'd be a cool rock formation. It's a picnic shelter, but it is also the craziest picnic shelter I have ever seen. Like, look at this thing. Why is this so extra? It's got 2 stories and like a lookout point again. Now, Guernsey does have your typical, you know, boat and camp and fishing down at the reservoir over here. I didn't look at this, sorry. This isn't like the coolest part, I don't think. And also just has like some cool trails that you can hike on. It's got all a state park should have, honestly. Guernsey is once again named after a nearby town, and you might think it's named after the island in the English Channel, but no, it's named after a guy again. C.A. Guernsey. And apparently this area was known as the Immigrants' Wash Tub. Okay. Feel like I want to get out of here and get moving down the road before a storm sweeps through again, so here we go, riding directly into the storm. After driving through maybe one of the worst storms I've driven through in my life, I finally reached the next state park and where I'd be camping for the night, Kurt Gowdy. Now, I got in late at night, so I didn't end up seeing anything at all that night, so, you know, I probably could have spent a little bit more time at Guernsey. Oh well. I'll have to redo that entrance, though. Damn, that's a pretty cool view. Honestly, the scenery isn't quite as spectacular as some stuff I've seen so far. Thought I'd start out by driving around both lakes. That's right, there's 2 lakes here. Just kind of see what the vibe is and then see if there's any trails I kind of want to hike around. And end up driving all the way to the other end of the state park. I do enjoy that this state park is a little bit more compact than the previous reservoirs. No, swimming is a little bit weird, but apparently the reason you can't swim in here is because of algae blooms, so actually, yeah, pretty good reason. Also, what this state park has to offer, of course, boat and camp and fishing, and quite a few campsites scattered throughout. The scenery is less about what you can see far off, and more about what you can see right here with these cool rock formations. Now, I decided to take a couple trails here. There is, of course, a few trails that do let you get more of a grand view of the area, which I always appreciate. The spot that seemed the most interesting to me was like this area near the dam, so I circled back, went over to it, and I was like, oh dang, you can walk right up to the dam and go down these stairs here? This is really cool. Then I saw this no trespassing sign, and I didn't know to what extent that applied. I'm just not gonna find out, and went right back up. But there were some cool trails around the area that you could get nice views of like this little miniature canyon here. Now this state park was named after Kurt Gowdy, a Wyoming outdoorsman who had this to say about it. It has 2 beautiful lakes, hiking trails, camping, boating, fishing, and beauty. It has everything I love. What greater honor can a man receive? And indeed it does. In fact, I didn't get to check out some of the longer trails, and there's like apparently like something called Hidden Falls, which looked pretty cool. Before I headed out, I checked out the visitor center, typical displays showing off the wildlife and whatnot on the map. Cool little area. And I checked out one more rock formation just outside the visitor center. Also, they have mountain biking available here. in case that interests you. Just more cool rock formations. Just cool area, man. That's all I gotta say about it. This is also definitely one of the more accessible ones, considering it's pretty close to Cheyenne. Granted, accessible by Wyoming standards isn't saying a lot. Compared to some of these, especially the next one, it's pretty easy to get to. Speaking of, it's gonna be a long drive to get to the next one, so you know, I made sure to get up all fueled and ready to go, and then sometimes you get all fueled up and ready to go, and you're ready for a long drive, and then the universe says, actually, nah, you're stuck behind this thing. Some people were just not having it. No way. Is he? I was eventually able to get past it, and then it was still a very long drive to get to the next one, which is Seminole State Park. And this one is by far the most remote, and had been my favorite drive to a park so far. You know, I was really missing kind of like the true middle of nowhere stuff. You know, I'm sure according to some people, all Wyoming's middle of nowhere, but like, this is on a different level of nowhereness. I only saw like 2 people driving up to it. I thought its name was like a butchering of Seminole, but it was actually also named after someone. And what the hell, they're French? Pretty much all of Wyoming state parks are just named after someone, I guess. Drive up here and get a nice view of the land. Honestly, I feel like the views just keep getting topped out here. I'm a big fan of deserty and like kind of semi-deserty areas a lot, so I really enjoy this. And Seminole is, of course, again, one of the largest reservoirs in Wyoming. This one's the 3rd largest, so we stepped up another 3 rankings in size. Now, I will not end up visiting the 1st or 2nd largest as part of this video. You can also peek into the canyon here, but then you go past it, and that's not part of the state park anymore, so I don't want to talk about that too much. Favorite view so far, honestly. Does have boat and camping vision, etc., but also has some day use areas with some picnic tables. And after admiring the scenery, I'm like, there's kinda not a lot here. Unless you're here for boating or camping. I wouldn't really want to camp here, it's kinda barren. Doesn't really feel like an oasis, it does just feel like a desert in a lake. I don't know how to describe it. Now, I did skim the website and there was mention of sand dunes. I couldn't tell that there's any spots to actually interact with them. I went down to one more access point to see if there was like kind of some way to get up to the sand dunes, because I like saw them kind of driving past here. But no, this one certainly was more sandy. It's the closest I got to getting completely stuck on this trip. I should not have driven through this like 5 feet of sand. Holy shit, that was so scary. Like if I get stuck out here, oh, I'm screwed. Once again, a storm came by, so I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna head out. It's time for another long drive to the next state park. I think this one might be the longest drive yet. Thankfully, you don't have to sit through all of that, and we can already reach the next one in the far southwestern corner of Wyoming, just on the limits of Evanston. It's Bear River State Park. I didn't know about this, but there was a Raptor talk at 5 o'clock, and guess what time I arrived? That's right, 4:59. No, I didn't check it out. It seemed geared towards a younger audience, and you know, several of the parents were also smoking, so I was like, maybe not my vibe. I went on to check out some of the hiking trails they had to offer, and you know, this is probably the most lush state park I had been to so far. It was also raining, don't worry about it. At least it wasn't like storm though. Improvements. You know, some pretty cool trails along the river here. A nice little bridge. There's a lot of trails that all just kind of have this vibe, but there's also this hill that's apparently for mountain biking and horses and hiking. However, it didn't feel the most friendly for the second two. Mainly seemed geared towards mountain biking. But thankfully it was raining, so no one else was hanging out there. There's actually so many weren't supposed to be up there. You're supposed to turn around because it's like a massive hazard, but you know, I was already up there, so don't worry about it. No one cared. There's a nice view up here. You can see Evanston, mountains all around. You can see Utah over here, which is kind of neat. And I accidentally walked down this road that wasn't part of the park for like 10 minutes. Oops. Wasn't labeled very well. Honestly, I feel like you could label this hill a little bit better. Oh, and here we have train spotting number 2. Now, the state park is, of course, named after the nearby Bear River, which is, of course, named after Edward Bear River? What? Nah, I'm kidding. It's named after the animal. I was just thinking at this point, man, there's a lot of state parks that are just someone's name. Now, I'm not done talking about all the amenities at this state park, because they also had an elk viewing paddock. They're chilling over in the corner. And also, a bison viewing paddock. That's right, they've got a whole herd of bison on site. Now, there's also the secondary part of the park. It's a little rest area. It's got a visitor center. And I'm sure this bison paddock is pretty cool if you don't see bison that often, but I don't know. Bison are neat, but also, like, I see them all the time. But also, there's a white one, so that's kind of cool. Well, that'll do it for this day. It's time to head to my hotel that shares a parking lot with a sex store and horse betting parlor. And now it's time for day 4, which is by far the busiest day of this trip. Starting off, driving through, oh my goodness, this is truly the middle of nowhere to get to the next state park. Now this one might actually be the longest drive to get to the next state park. Now once I got into the mountains, I was like, I'll take the scenic route to the state park. Once I started driving this route, I was like, alright, this next state park's gonna be a banger. Up high on this mountain peak, I can see where we're heading next. Sinks Canyon. I'm not entirely sure if I pointed at the right canyon here. After setting down the switchbacks, I reach the visitor center. And I can't believe this whole time I could have been listening to the Wyoming Road Trip summer playlist. Now, the first thing I decided to check out was the Sinks, which is where this park gets its name from. It's like this kind of cool little cave area here where the Paposia River flows down over the rocks and then disappears in between the cracks. Also, guess how Paposia is spelled? You will not. Yeah. And it was here I witnessed a man drive this absolute contraption of a vehicle, which, I mean, is the perfect device to visit a state park in. This is probably like one of the coolest areas I've been on the trip so far. A nice, cool little cave area, very refreshing, nice view from here. Now, a really cool thing about this canyon is you can see a stark contrast between both sides of the canyon, where the south side of this mountain is like completely barren and just not a lot of plants over here because it's just like receives that much more sun, while the north side of this mountain is much more lush and green because it's not getting berated by the sun as much. You know, it's a pretty cool contrast to see. I just think that's neat. But then I walk down to the second part of the Paposia River, the Rise, where the river re-emerges from the cracks and has like this cool little trout pool. Now you can feed them, but I did not have a quarter. The water mysteriously disappears underground. I'd say walking distance, it took 10 minutes to get between the two, but it takes 2 to 4 hours for dye, which is placed near the entrance of the sinks, to reappear at the Rise. So who knows what's going on underground? Well, we actually do know a little bit because you see, something I did not realize when I first visited is that there is a cave here, and you are able to go in it. But not during July. You're not able to go to it until late August or September, depending on the year. So, you know what that means? That's right, I went back, and I took the scenic route. When I returned, I did stay at the campground. It's a pretty nice little area. Pretty nice view to wake up to. In the morning before my cave tour, I decided to check out this trail I hadn't seen before, which goes up to this climbing area. Now, even if I had been there when they offered climbing, I wouldn't have done it. I'm not a big fan of climbing, as I like to have feet. As I like to have ground beneath my feet. It's not necessarily a fear of heights. I just like having something to stand on. I don't know how to describe it. Still, pretty cool view from here. And I imagine the views up there are incredible, at least based on this view I got going down into the switchbacks. If anything like this, oh man. Amazing. If anyone's into rock climbing, that's definitely a cool thing you could check out. Enough stalling, it's cave time. Now, this is a little bit different than cave tours I'm used to. First of all, we got all geared up wearing overalls and a helmet, and they gave us gloves. We got geared up in the visitor center and then walked on over to the entrance. That's right, there's the entrance. Doesn't it look fun? The first step is shimmying down these rocks. Now, the nice thing is that this is the hardest part of the cave. This is like the narrowest squeeze. Then you kind of know like, hey, if I can do this, then I can do the rest of the cave. You get a nice little barometer right off the bat. Probably shimmy down rocks for like 20 feet. And then you crawl on your hands and knees for like a couple minutes before reaching the main cave area. Once you get into the main cave, you can see the main texture here, which is like the scalloping caused by water rushing and getting pooled up in the limestone every summer. The reason you're not able to go into this cave during the summer is because the river completely floods it. That's right, this entire place is filled with water, which is kind of crazy. Now, sometimes you can spot a fossil in here, and there's also these cool shelves that form. Now, this cave is actually pretty new, both in terms of its actual age and its discovery. It was only discovered in the 90s when 2 state park employees were pulling weeds. And unlike most caves where I've gone on a cave tour, there's no stalactite type formations at all. But they're like, oh, we've got snodites, and it's like, that is not as cool. Now, this one's definitely more about the experience, I'd say, than the formations. Although, there's definitely some cool stuff happening. For example, you can see cave fish. Some fish get swept up in the river and then get dragged down here, and now they're stuck here. Some populations have been here for thousands of years. Also, as is mandatory with every cave tour, there comes a time when all the lights get turned off, leaving you in complete darkness. And this time, my brain started seeing faint imprints of the scalloping everywhere, so that's neat. Also underground here, we can observe the re-emergence of the Papoja River for a brief period. Nobody knows what happens to it in the other parts of the cave, and some say there might be a massive underground lake, or it just takes a while to get through like cracks and fissures. On the website, they're like, alright, you gotta be in top physical condition, but honestly, the most straining thing you have to do is support yourself from a rope to pull yourself back up out of the cave. That's about it. You gotta crawl around a lot too. If you don't like crawling, probably shouldn't go in here. Definitely more unique cave experience than I'm used to. Would recommend. Guess what it's time for? Another reservoir. Moving on a little bit north to Boysen State Park. This is the largest state park in Wyoming, and it's the 4th largest reservoir in the state, and there are campsites everywhere out here. Visited the first shore, and it's pretty barren. I definitely am not going to be visiting all of them because they're pretty similar. Kind of a barren, arid lakeside shore. I don't know. What do you want, man? These sheds with bunk beds make a return as well. The park is more than just these dusty shores, though. You see these mountains back here? The park actually continues into them for a little bit. And you can see the other side of the dam. The vibe I get from this place is like, man, I want to visit Zion National Park. And it's like, we have Zion at home. Boysen State Park. Now, the first campsite I visited had a day use area. This one, not so much. I just kind of parked over here, kind of looked around. Cool view, though. Zion at home is still decently cool. Checked out some more stops, and actually you can drive along the dam. Now this road looks really cool, but I don't think I'm allowed to go up it, and even if I could, probably not a great idea. This one's pretty cool. You're able to see both sides of the dam. Again, this place is massive. I stopped here again after Sinks Canyon to try and get some more new angles, see some fall colors. It actually dried up quite a bit here, leaving this like kind of cool beach area over here. Again, it has boat and camp fish and all that stuff. Now, I went on the other side of the lake, get some new viewpoints, and you can see some nice fall colors on the trees here. This place is massive. There's so many campgrounds along the shore here. There's not a lot of day use out here, but I just kind of like parked at a campground because like no one was around. Except for when I was about to leave, then a state park ranger showed up and I was like, why is he here? This doesn't feel like a coincidence. And it's also got my favorite thing, random dirt roads. Also, I found a chevron lying on the road. Yeah, that's Boysen. When I first visited, I was like having reservoir fatigue. I'm like, yeah, it's another reservoir, whoop-de-doo. But like, it does have some really cool views. The next one is Hot Springs in Thermopolis, Wyoming. And when I first drove into this state park, I was stunned. I'm like, what the fuck? Okay, yeah, it's like a city park, there's a hotel, there's a water park. I knew there's like hot springs, but I didn't know what? I was stunned. I was like, I don't know what's going on here. There's this thing. The first thing I decided to check out was this view down by the river over here. This is like a miniature Yellowstone here. I was not expecting this type of thing. Like, I knew about this beehive or whatever, not about all these pools and they like pour into the river here, and I'm like, holy shit, dude, we're so back. I like this is basically what I was thinking. I couldn't get a single coherent thought out. All right, I guess I'll drive around. There's also mention of a bison paddock around here, but first I'm gonna stop for some cool viewpoints. From the whole park, you can see this like butte here, and of course I'm wondering, can I go up there? This didn't look like an official trail, not too well marked. Has uncertainty ever stopped me before? Yes, I am very easily discouraged. But this looked like it was gonna be a really cool view. I went for it, and it was a decently steep hike up here. I did feel like I was dying a bit. Get up here, see that there's a memorial up here, so probably are allowed to go up here. They would have put a sign if I wasn't allowed, right? Who cares? I already went up there. Can't sue me. There's also like this stone chair here, and this felt like a nice culmination of the past week. Overlooking Thermopolis on my stone throne that's not mine, but it's just up here. This view looks like you could put it on a Visit Wyoming postcard, honestly. Then I go down and eventually go and see the bison in their little paddock. Again, I've said my thoughts on bison. They've got a little bit more space to roam here. Bison, they're neat. Other people might find them more neat. Other people might find them less neat. Cool views all around. Also, this red dirt and golden grass field that's kind of covering the whole area. Crazy vibe. Little cemetery. After checking out the bison, I go down here to check out the pools, get some more angles, walk across this bridge, get the whole view of the springs. It's like, dang, that's really cool. Now, there is no camping here, but there is a hotel on the premises. Of course, there's the actual hot springs. There's actually 3 facilities in the state park. The state bathhouse, Helly's TP Pools and Spa, which is this one over here, and Star Plunge, which is like the water park looking one with the slide and whatnot. I did not get any footage from inside that because I feel really weird recording inside a pool. There's also this structure over here to get a slightly higher vantage point. Okay. Don't know what the point of it is when there's like the hills right there, but Hey, it's here as well. This park is just so jam-packed with stuff. So many of these parks have just been so large, and they're just kind of like spread out everywhere. You know, there's like, they have a bunch of camping, but they're like, all the areas feel the same, where this is like, there's a bunch of different stuff all in one little package. Also, it's free to enter. Unless you're doing like a hot spring or hotel, all that other stuff, you just do. Just walk around. They also have 2 normal ponds here. Or so it seems. Because they have fish feeding. And I actually did have a quarter here, so I could feed all these koi. Now feeding these fish feels like a really fitting end to the state parks. But we're not done yet. We got one more. Heading on up near Yellowstone for the last one. It's gonna take a little bit of time, so it's a perfect time to listen to the Wyoming Summer Trip playlist. It's mid. Finally reached Buffalo Bill State Park, the final state park and where I'd be camping for this last night. It has some beautiful views. This one was named after Cowboy Buffalo Bill, and it's the 7th largest reservoir in Wyoming. For those not keeping track, I visited 5 out of 10 of the largest reservoirs of Wyoming on this trip. That's neat. Want to get up in the morning, check out some more views. Of course, it's got boating, camping, fishing, all your standard state park stuff. And it does have some picnic areas for some day use, but there is not a lot to do here. There's like a rocky beach you can go down to, picnic tables. Yeah, cool views. Not a lot to say. That's it. That's the 11 state parks. Now, before we get into the ranking, I want to do an intermission for some things I saw along the trip that weren't state parks, but were mildly interesting. Skip to this time if you just want to see the ranking. 2 Sinclair dinos at 1 gas station. For those who don't know, Sinclair's a gas station chain out here in the West, whose mascot logo is a dinosaur, and they have these little plastic dinosaurs in front of all their buildings. And it's based in the town of Sinclair, Wyoming, which I ended up passing through, which I believe started out as a company town just, you know, for Sinclair employees. It's funny because it's, you know, mostly refinery, but also it has like this surprisingly quaint little like town square area. Kind of a cool looking town hall. There's also this playground with like Sinclair dinos. Like, imagine if you saw an Exxon Mobil playground. Some more things I saw. Big dump truck. Now I also stopped in the town of Kemmerer, Wyoming, which made a big deal about all the fossils that had been found there. You know, it's a pretty cool vibe. It also has the first J.C. Penney. The first J.C. Penney is in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming. Unfortunately, it didn't open till 11. For some reason, it really shocked me that they had like modern ads up in the windows. I don't know. It felt really weird now place. Once again, I gotta mention the Windy Mountains, which is where I traveled through to get to Sinks Canyon. Beautiful area. Amazing views. I hiked up to this peak up here. I also passed by Devil's Tower. Finally saw that for the first time. And also Tetons. Now, I've driven through Tetons before, but this time I was able to actually see them. Turns out it's pretty cool when you can actually see them. Now, let's get into the ranking. These letter tiers are going to be comparable to the letter tiers I used in the Montana video, and will be for any future states I do. Will I find out at some point that my tiers are horribly skewed? Maybe. Starting out with C tier. That's right, the lowest state park I believe belongs in C tier. C tier state parks, I think, you know, they're decent. And in 11th place, it's Ednes K. Wilkins. There's not a lot to say about this state park. Definitely say it's a decent state park. It's got kind of an alright vibe along the river here. Now, it definitely has the worst scenery out of the state parks in Wyoming, in my opinion. Trails are nice. It's definitely a serviceable state park. Moving on to B tier immediately. B tier parks, they're like good. Not great, but they're good. At number 10, it's Keyhole Reservoir. Now, being a decent reservoir, having all your standard reservoir fixings, I think will get you into C tier. What pushes Keyhole into like a low B tier are like this cool cliff area mostly, you know, and the fact that it does have a public accessible beach, because you don't see that in every reservoir state park, so that is nice. Its decent little forest also helps push it into B. In 9th place is Bear River State Park. You know, it's pretty nice and pleasant along the river. You also get some nice views on this mountain biking hill, and also earns points, you know, for having this hill. Also having elk and bison paddocks is neat. I think it's good, but like it's just missing something that would push it into great. Similar thing for number 8, Buffalo Bill. It's really getting carried by the scenery here. Beautiful view of the mountains and of the reservoir. Who'd have thought that the one near Yellowstone would be near the bottom, but it is. You know, it does have all your standard reservoir things, but also it just doesn't have that much to do outside of that. we're all rated an A tier. A tier parks, I think they're pretty good, and they probably stand out in one category and are sufficient in all the others. Number 7 is Seminole. It's getting hard carried here by the scenery. It has some of my favorite scenery on this whole trip. I can understand if most people probably wouldn't rank it this high because I'm a big fan of the desert. Well, the mountainous desert, I should say. It does have day use, but the day use areas are just kind of lackluster. The vibe around the lake is just pretty dead. Like, I don't mean that in terms of how many people are there. I mean, it's just like, there's not a lot of plant life. It's just kind of like, really cool views again. So I think it earns a low A tier. It's a similar situation for Boysen. I definitely think it gets ahead of Seminole because you're able to peek on both sides of the canyon, and this is like its own whole little vibe over here. But on the other side, once again, the lake, very arid, dry, not much plant life, just kind of like, But it does have more campsites. The day use areas feel slightly nicer than Seminole, and it does have like a lot of them again. Moving on to what I'd say is mid A tier is Glendo State Park. It has got like all the state park things. A lake, hiking trails, some good views, fishing. It's definitely got the best beach out of any of the state parks I visited in Wyoming. Very nice area to hang out in, I'd say. And a cool view of the mountains. Very solid. It's just like middle of the A tier. In 4th place is Kurt Gowdy. Kurt Gowdy, I'd say, is lacking in grand, spectacular views, although it does have a couple of nice, sweeping views, but its strengths are definitely more in the rock formations around it. Of course, that was all your standard state park stuff. It does earn points for having a lot more hiking than the others. It does lose a little bit of these imaginary points that don't mean anything. I just keep saying that because, like, it's a good placeholder word. For not being able to swim in the lake, I don't know if that would change its ranking that much. Also has a visitor center, which is always a plus. It's somewhere I would want to go again. In 3rd place is Guernsey. Once again, lovely scenery, but unlike some things lower in A tier, it's not really lacking in other areas. It's got hiking, camping, boats. You know, it is kind of scrubland, but it does not feel just quite as arid and dead as Boysen and Seminole. What keeps it from S tier is the sauce. Now, the final 2 state parks are gonna be in S tier. Parks in S tier, they've got something that's just like, you can't find this anywhere else. And I wasn't sure I was gonna find that on this trip, and I'm surprised I found 2 of them. My ranking for these 2 could go either way. Number 2 is gonna be Hot Springs. Now, Hot Springs has everything I like in a state park. Of course, it's got views of the structures in the state park, it's got grand sweeping views, it's got some wildlife, it's got some hiking trails. It doesn't have camping or a big lake, but you know, a lot of state parks have those, so those don't earn too many points. It does have a hotel, so you can't stay on there. Where it really shines, honestly brings it to S tier alone, might be just the hot spring formations. Like, this miniature Yellowstone here, I think on its own might put it in S tier. Like, I haven't seen this anywhere else outside of Yellowstone. Like, and it's also got a nice little city park area, super unique vibe. Dinosaur statues, I think I forgot to mention this, but it has dinosaur statues, which is a plus for me, because at heart, I am a 6-year-old who loves dinosaurs. Once again, really tough call between the top 2 here. Right now, I would say Sinks Canyon is my favorite state park in Wyoming. Magnificent views, both like within the canyon and overlooking it. Good trails, it's got camping. As soon as I entered it, I was like, oh, this is my favorite one. And then when I saw Sinks, I was like, this might be S tier. This right here, this little microcosm, this area, I don't know how to describe it, it's just so cool to me. And then you add in all that other stuff, and the trout, they've got like fish you can see. Like, they're big-ass fish, dude. Now, a lot of the state parks in Wyoming, I felt like were too big and sprawling. It's not as if, like, every little corner felt like it had something unique into it. Sinks Canyon and Hot Springs, they're both nice and compact, but there's a lot going on in them. And, you know, the cave, I think, just pushes it into first place for me. I'm a big fan of caves. Has a state park with a cave gotten first place both times now? Yes. Let me know what you think. What was your favorite? Which one would you most want to go to? Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you liked the video. As I mentioned, last year I visited all the state parks in Montana, so you should check that video out if you haven't already. Subscribe because I might do some more states in the future. Let me know what state you think I should do next. It's probably gonna be something that borders Montana unless there's like a huge demand for something outside that area. I really appreciate y'all watching these videos. The state park videos have been some of my favorite to create. They are really fun, but they also do take a lot of effort from like planning to actually driving around and recording them and then editing. So yeah, a lot of fun, but also a lot of work. So if you've enjoyed these, you know, please let me know. Until the next time I visit all the state parks in a state, this has been Goshen Man, the state parks of Wyoming.